Hi, good evening. Welcome to another episode of Unsuited. We're on episode 9, season 1, and our guest today is one of the very few designated women senior counsels at the Bombay Bar. She's built a very solid reputation through her work and her work ethic. Her peers refer to her as a firebrand, compassionate, and kind. When we asked her what designation we should put in for her, she insisted that we call her a student of law. So, welcoming a student of law today, Miss Rajani Iyer, Senior Advocate, Bombay Bar. Welcome, ma'am, and good evening. You're on mute. Thank you. Thank you for joining us.
All of you, hi.
Hi. Thank you for being here. Over to you, Vikas.
Good evening, ma'am. How are you?
Well, Vikas, wonderful Sunday evening with the rain.
It is.
It's cool, at least,
it is
not
nice
warm.
And cool.
Yeah.
Super. So thank you again for joining us on the Unsuited program and being part of this new format that IDEX Legal and Grey Matter created a couple of months ago. And it is very much
inviting me.
And it is very much an opportunity to look at the kind of more personal side of lawyers across the country, from bar, bench, in-house counsel, etc. So we're going to dive straight away back into your kind of time during schooling and college, because you'd mentioned in an earlier discussion we had that you believe that your school, Queen Mary, St. Xavier's College, and then GLC all had a role to play in how you personally shaped up. So can you throw some light on how the educational institutions you go to help build who you become in life?
Some of us are very fortunate in that we've had a good grounding in institutions of repute of our times. Queen Mary was then Queen Mary High School for girls. It was only for girls and it was very near home. So yes, it did mean no end of good to have been able to go to that school. Compared to what I see today amongst families with children who are school-going children, there are a number of them in my building who go to Queen Mary's. In my time, we had subjects ranging from craft and a band to elocution, drama. I was Shylock in Shakespeare's play in school, singing the national anthem with my voice, which is one of the most Besura voices, but I was encouraged to sing, to doing something like cooking. You had the entire gamut, and that was within school hours. We had a wonderful principal who said, I'm going to increase your periods by 1, but not the timings of the school. And the last period is going to be homework, so that you do homework in school and you don't do homework at home. Because I want you to go home and be with your parents and interact with them and play. Now, these sort of things leave a lasting memory. I always was in the 5. But I was always in the 5 from the bottom of the class. And one particular teacher who's now my friend, philosopher and guide, called Rati Wadia, said, Rajani, you're capable of doing much better. Just that one sentence when I was in standard 6 shot me to the top.
Wow.
These sort of things you can't forget. You just can't forget. Just one line, Rajani, you're capable of doing more. That sort of thing. So yes, the school has had a very important grounding for me. From there, going into a co-ed college like Xavier's and meeting firebrands who are today some of the most senior advocates in the Bombay Bar, Aspi Chinoy. I've known him since '69, thanks to being college mates with him. My career there as a firebrand really started because he was insistent that as students, we were entitled to our own body and not have a college union council, but have something called a students' union council. We asked for it, we fought for it, and we got it. From there, before I came to GLC, I was in Bombay University. And in Bombay University, I happened to do my MA in economics at a time when they shifted from the Fort campus to the Kalina campus without any facilities. The campus didn't have a canteen. The campus didn't have a library. The campus didn't have any restrooms. Therefore, after putting up with it for some time, we then went on a strike. And that strike brought us to the Fountain campus. And we said that we wouldn't shout slogans or something, but just draw attention to ourselves and then dissolve the strike. So what we did is we went into the Fort campus building and locked ourselves in and asked all the staff to leave. And then put padlocks so that nobody could come into the Fountain campus once office hours started. We made the headlines, but within coming to know that, yes, we made our mark, we just dissolved. The sagacity of the staff whom we interacted with there ensured that there was no action taken against any of us. Otherwise, it's so easy for the Vice Chancellor or the Registrar just to call people in and say, do what's necessary with them. But all this didn't happen because of the type of persons that we had. A lady called Alu Dastur was our head of the politics department. And she saw what we were asking for. So, and then I came into GLC. And the reason why I take the name of Miss Dastur is one reason that later on, she being associated with Mani Bhavan said, Rajani, I want you to be associated with Mani Bhavan. Today I'm associated with Mani Bhavan. And let me share something with you. I'm showing you a picture. Are you able to see the picture?
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
Oh my God.
Yeah, this is
That's
when Mr. Obama visited the Mani Bhavan. Now,
Wow.
here was a lady who could have taken action against us, instigated, but she saw that we were doing the right thing and ultimately led me to something where I could meet up with the President of the United States when he made his first halt in India at Mani Bhavan. Now, I think my journey through my various educational institutions and persons is what gave me this opportunity. Now you see why I say our education is so important and the persons who man those educational institutions are so important.
I mean, there's some incredible stories all the way from Queen Mary's to Xavier's to GLC, and it seems like you were, I don't know if it was, that was a time you were fortunate to have great kind of mentors or people you came across that kind of really inspired the activist side in you as well.
Absolutely. And acknowledge that this activist is an activist who needs grooming and not condemnation.
That's excellent, because in today's era,
incredible thought. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and that's not something we hear of about today, because it's very much as soon as anyone's protesting or raising an issue, it seems to get clamped down on very quickly. So it's
absolutely. I was never asked to look over my shoulder.
This was when? This was the early 70s, was it?
This was in the early 70s, yeah.
Okay.
I joined school sometime in 1956. I graduated in 68. And then I came into Xavier's till 72, Kalina campus in 74. Yeah.
I'm curious to ask, did Xavier's have the well-known Malhar festival back then as well?
No, we didn't have the Malhar festival. What we were famous for then was the Social Service League. That gave me an opportunity of going into the village which was adopted by us in Xavier's called Vethi.
Okay.
And spend a couple of days, if not a week plus, living in Vethi and joining the people of Vethi in a project which was important for them. Generally, we went there during the summer break, and therefore it was digging the water holding pond just before the monsoons came in. That is the sort of thing that we used to physically help out with. But, you know, living in tents, the sort of restroom facilities were a plank across a hole, you know, and stuff like that. And it brought us face to face with real India. That is something which was wonderful. And I joined something called the Sophia Xavier scheme when I was in Xavier's Tanisha, where we were told you need not attend lectures. but you can go into the library and write papers. And you'll have professors of Sophia and Xavier's instructing you and assessing you. This was unheard of then when the college invited us not to attend lectures. So we had the best professors from both Sophia and Xavier's helping us, though we were enrolled in Xavier's.
Understood. Wow.
And this led us to making a demand for a change when we were in the campus. We said, we don't want 100% at the end of the year. We want you to assess us 60% with papers, or 40%, I'm not sure, 40% of research papers that we submit through the year. The professors didn't like it much because they had to work through the year, assessing us. So, it led to a lot of challenges and a lot of learning of being on the wrong side of the classroom, on the right side of the classroom, etc. Yeah, so institutions that you are associated with for purposes of education are so important, very important.
And it's interesting that you speak of teaching, because you also taught yourself for a short while, didn't you, before you chose to sort of study the law as your...
Absolutely. If I hadn't succeeded in law, I would have gone back to teaching. I came into law because I was teaching economics, and my first salary was a wonderful packet of something like 300 plus house rent allowance and travel allowance, etc. So I think it was a packet of 600 plus or something. The economics of teaching economics forced me into law. That's the way I look at it, Yeah, well, but then
economics
connect with the students' eyes, that is what is so important. That, yes, I understood what this lady is talking about.
True. And do you still teach occasionally when you get the chance? You do, right? You do some guest lectures and honorary classes.
I think now it's by and large taken over by the youngsters, and rightly so, who are so much more adept at multimedia presentations and stuff. I'm still rather old school. Yeah.
I think if you're talking and nobody needs a multimedia presentation to go along with that powerful voice and content. So please keep teaching.
I can't hear myself, so I can't say yes to that.
Well, after this interview, we'll send you a link so you can peacefully sit back and see how you sound and look on camera, and then make a well-informed decision.
Okay. Done.
So Rajani ma'am, you also mentioned when we were chatting that as well as these kind of strong influences from your teachers and academic mentors, your parents also had a large influence on your upbringing. And in particular, you mentioned your mother, who was, from the conversation we had, was really ahead of her time. There's also a firebrand woman in the 70s.
I am very fortunate because I got up today and one of the tweets, or it's not a tweet, sorry, I think it's a WhatsApp, because I'm not on tweet, I'm on WhatsApp, said that today was Parents' Day. Thank you, Parents' Day. And I said, oh, wow, I'm doing it on that day. Yes, my mother was a lasting and a long-term influence because I had her friendship and companionship for much longer than my father's. My father passed away when I was around 30. I had mummy's companionship till I was about, say, 64. So, that also has an impact. But yes, both of them, the importance of their personality, if I may say so. My brother and I are first generation graduates in my family. My father did what is called the advocate's exam, which didn't require you to be a graduate. My mother did her graduation the year after my father passed away, after having studied for her BA through distance during his lifetime, 3-year period during his lifetime, and she continued and gave her exam the year after he passed away. But yes, she was a very strong woman. She held our family together through 62 and the 65 and the Chinese war and the second Pakistan and 71 war, etc. She made us make our choices that we had to do A, B, and C, knit, at that age to be told that I had to sit up and I must knit a cardigan for our Javans. She went through what is called the St. James Ambulance nursing course. Very strong woman. She wanted to travel. She traveled when I was age 3. She went from here to England by ship. She was away from 5 months, but she said, I want to see England and I'm getting a chance to see England. So I'm going to go to England. Strong choices, but that has shaped me into being what I am. I'll tell you the strength of character that she had. I don't know whether I've shared this with you. She associated with various ladies groups. One of them was a Maharashtrian traditional, most of them were traditional Maharashtrian ladies groups. So in one, she rose to being the president of that Maharashtrian group, despite not being a Maharashtrian. All right. That goes to show the way she was able to, miljul ke rehna, that sort of thing.
Mm.
So some ladies said, Kanta tai, her name was Kanta, तुमची मुलगी अजूनपर्यंत लग्न नाही झालं तिचं. So she turned around and says in Marathi, I translate it into English, some bloke somewhere is a happy bloke for not being married to her. Why don't you let him be happy? She was never, ever bothered with this question ever again. This is what I say, that you have to be happily ensconced in the space that you've got. She taught me how I could do that.
Wow.
Yeah,
Incredible.
she was a very strong influence. My father also went through a lot. He was, after doing the exams, he was the junior of Mr. Munshi, Kanayalal Munshi, the first Minister of Food in Mr. Nehru's cabinet. Came back because he didn't like Delhi and the oppressiveness of the Delhi atmosphere. In those days, I'm talking about early 50s. And he came back here and set himself a wonderful practice, joined a gentleman called Haribhai Desai. And we had a great time. We had a great time. He warned me when I joined the profession, Rajani, you won't earn anything for 10 years. Huh? You better be careful. You know what you're getting into. You're saying you're not earning enough, but you know what you're getting yourself into. I said, yeah. So they were there in the back. Yeah.
Just Chris, you said when your mother went to England on the ship, was with the whole family, or what was that?
No, she went along with a ladies' group. I was shipped off to Madras to be with her mother and my aunt, who took care of me for about, say, 5 months. Yeah. She went on her road. My brother and my father were here in Bombay. I was in Madras, and she was having a trip. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, that's kind of sometimes unheard of even today, let alone like 60 years ago.
Yeah, she used to tell my father, I want to travel. You've done your traveling with Munshiji. That doesn't mean I can't travel. You earn, I will travel. Very clear. Yeah.
I think a woman after Tanisha's heart.
Yeah.
I like it. So clear. Yeah. But you're right, ma'am, when you say that, tough choices and very strong choices, more importantly, right? To take on a trip like that, I think most women today would still hesitate. Even a week-long trip, I think most mothers or new mothers are very hesitant.
But see, the difference, Tanisha, is it was a choice that she had to make because of the support, of her mother, right, her sisters,
right,
my father, and she didn't have a career which had to be competing with this. So today, when you say, as of today, it's a difficult choice to make, it's because of the demands of a career, which has to be added to the pot when we make this sort of choice. True. How many of us are going to be able to survive 6 months of absence from our career and get back to where we are without the glass ceiling having been lowered? Correct. She didn't have to fear that. So that is something that we have to take, into account when we talk about whether a person would have been able to do it today.
True.
She was fortunate because of the support that she got from her family. We mustn't forget that. And that support is perhaps what gave her that strong mind, thankfully, because I have got a similar strong mind thanks to it coming down.
True. This becomes an enabler. You're right. Not worrying about your career, because you talk of even a 2-month sabbatical for most people, even in the legal profession, they very quickly start, the underlying fear is that we will become redundant if we're away even for 2 weeks, leave alone
Yeah,
anything longer.
redundant, in addition to redundant, today it is for purposes of being able to feed your family.
Correct.
In addition to the glass ceiling, I remember my father in 75 went abroad for the first time with my mother. All right. And he says, Rajani, will people forget me when I come back? And this was I was 22 and I said, who can forget you, Dad? I didn't realize what he was talking about then. But a gentleman who was so much into his career could also think along those lines is something that,
True.
coming back and looking back on it today, it is something that is a challenge for a person who is responsible for putting the food on the table, as I always refer to it.
Agreed. But
Yeah.
you have taken after your mother and you do enjoy traveling. And I remember that you also take July and August largely off to travel, right? That's your time to go away.
I used to, yeah. I think it might be better to say sometime between July, August, September.
Okay.
There was once a time when I remember, and this was one of the, I don't know what, but someone was taking a time and a date in Central Court. And they said, we'd like to have this date. And I remember the judge saying, I don't think Miss Iyer will be here then.
Wow.
So those timings were very well known.
Wonderful.
It's also beautiful that the way you talk about your, especially your mother and father, but you talk about companionship and friendship. So that's also quite rare to hear children talking, especially at that young an age as well, about companionship with their parents.
Yeah, that's right. But fortunate, as I say, fortunate.
Yeah. And then
Ladli beti bhi thi.
Correct.
Because my sibling is a brother who's 7 years my senior. So I was the Ladli beti also of the family.
So lucky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you graduated and started your career also through a very challenging times, because it was during the 70s. And as well as you said, your academic mentors, your parents,
oh, yes.
you had someone like Indira Gandhi who was coming, the second kind of phase of her career in the 70s, where she was probably also an icon and strong role model for a lot of young Indians at up to the early mid-70s, and then that flipped obviously later. What kind of
glorious
in that period have in your life?
Yes, of course, the glorious time of 71. The Bangladesh War and what she stood for, Ma Durga. Then she soon thereafter, when I was in college, we had the bank nationalization, and soon thereafter we had the abolition of the princely purses. All this seemed from a person who was ready to be a Marxist, like Minu Masani. In retrospect, I remember with fondness what Minu said. If you are 17 and not a Marxist, you have no heart. If you are 70 and continue to be a Marxist, you have no head. I was around 17 then, and I was prone to, Marxism and leftists, and therefore one said yay to everything that Mrs. Gandhi was doing. And then came 75, and I suddenly found that there was an air of disquiet. And that is something that I kept asking my father and my brother, who are both lawyers. I mean, what the hell is happening? How is this happening, sort of thing, And I was told, yes, there's an emergency declared. I said, I know that. Constitution, etc. I said, ye cheez, animal mujhe janna hai. What is this animal called the Constitution, which can, bring this about in our... and I said, all right, I'm going to start doing law. Which was, my father was taken aback because he had said, why don't you do law? And I said, you are a lawyer? I don't want to be a lawyer. That sort of thing. And I said, yes, I want to do law. So I did law after taking a year off between finishing my MA and starting law. I joined law because of the emergency, and I went into government law college, and I had an eye-opener of a time there. I really had an eye-opener of a time because I learned about our laws, and that sort of shaped me into wanting to consider law as a career if I needed to at any point in time. But I also came in touch with brilliant people. For example, during the emergency, Government Law College being a government-run institution, there were so many no's all round. We were organizing lectures. Ram had said something which had offended the Ram Jethmalani had said something that had offended the powers that be, and there was a warrant issued for him. Now that was the person who had been able to do something so that it wasn't in course. And at that point in time, we said we want to have Ram in Government Law College talking to us. So what happened was that I spoke to Ram because he and my father were good friends. And I said, Uncle, this is what has happened. So he says, all right, I'll come. So when we went into college, the principal and the others were slightly taken aback. And they said he must talk only about law and not about politics. So I went back and I said, this is what the position is here. Theek hai, I'll talk about cross-examination. I went back and I told the college that he's going to talk about cross-examination. Ram being Ram, he says, what is the ultimate test of cross-examination? Question hour in Parliament. And there he went into it. The quickness with which he did it was such an eye-opener. Maja aa gaya. Everyone sitting on the first row turned white, and one by one they left. But we students had a gala time. What a person he was, To say that I talk about cross-examination and then veer around to something like this. Great. So yes, the emergency showed me the other side of politicians. It made me sort of beware of politicians and their politics. But their way with words, some of them with their actions, is something that I said I must always keep in mind and learn from them. Yeah. Emergency was a great, great teacher.
And that obviously sparked you into taking law as a much more passionate activist career as well. I think
all this, yes, but I think what really sort of switched me on to becoming passionate about the law was the person who was my senior. I continue calling who is my senior, the late Mr. Ashok Desai. He was an activist in the law, taking up cases of the marginalized or the politically challenged. He had done a lot of the Back Bay case for Mr. Modi. He had done the Sakharam Binder case for his friend. So I joined his chambers, and the sort of work that I saw him do for, the Spastic Society school. Miss Chib had come, and the work he readily took on for her, the Blind Society, Society for the Blind, he did work for them. So that also, sort of said that, all right, law need not be dry as one finds. It need not be as theatrical as in movies, but there is something good that can be done with this tool of law. So that is why I said, I'm going to stay put for longer. And fortunately, I didn't have the economics part of it troubling me. So I hung around, and one of the first matters which I did was the slum dwellers case. Soon thereafter, Ashok Bhai was doing the Antule cement case as it is known. So he sort of ensured that I wasn't sitting workless in the library, and said, come on, join me in this matter, along with another young junior called Navroz Sirvai. So both of us were gotten involved in that matter by him. Met persons like Pranalini Tai, met persons like Baburao Samant, Kamal Desai, all thanks to this matter. And we were before a judge called Justice Lenton in that matter. Now, the connect with Justice Lenton is that in the slum dwellers matter, when again Mr. Antule wanted to clear Bombay of all slum dwellers, we had filed a petition which was being half prepared in the library and the other half was being shown to him page by page. And he had said, I don't believe this can be done. And he, along with Temta Nandhyaru Jina, the late Mr. Temta Nandhyaru Jina, who was also arguing the matter for us, visited various of these slum dwellers, visited the slums, entered their homes. And I still vividly recall Mr. Justice Lenton in his black coat, Tempan in his tie and in his buttoned-up shirt, trying not to put their handkerchiefs to their noses, but traipsing around. And then we got our judgment before Justice Lenton in the slum dwellers case. And he was the person who was thereafter hearing the Antule Cement case when the final hearing went on. So there was a sense of saying that tab hua tha to ab bhi kuch na kuch ho jayega, ye matter may be. He will see the correctness of what is being argued, and stuff like that. And then when Ashok Bhai got the judgment in his favor, it further sort of endorsed that, yes, this is where I belong. And I continued.
That's incredible, because you don't often hear that version of why people join the law, especially today's generation. It's very much law is a corporate career, doing deals, making money, but kind of stories you're telling from that time is very much about joining law to make a difference, like make a real difference to society and bring justice to people.
I'm fortunate because I got that window. I am fortunate because I got the person who could lead me through that door. I'm fortunate that I also, like my mother, had the family backing. There's so many other factors also which make the challenges before today's youth slightly different from the challenge it was then. It was then about no entry, you must break it down. Now there is no question of no entry. It's a question of which lane am I going to take, the one with the curve or the one which is straight? The choices are different. In this race, I want the one which is straight. I don't want the one which has a curve in it, sort of thing.
Speaking of your junior counsel days, ma'am, I'm curious to ask.
Yes.
Like you said, you've been fortunate to have someone like the late Ashok Bhai as your mentor, maybe some fantastic colleagues, whether from your chamber or otherwise. So how important is a chamber grooming, your peer set? How impactful and important are they in really shaping a lawyer's, especially an arguing counsel's career? Will you help us understand that, please?
Tanisha, one of the first things I was told when I went to Mr. Desai, I said, Ashok Bhai would like to join your chambers. He says, look, the chambers which I am occupying, at present, I'm not going to be able to ask you to come and attend chambers. Because there's no space.
I'm going to interject here for a moment to just say, you are also a solicitor, as one of our listeners here, Mr. Sharad Abhyankar, pointed out, that you are one of the few solicitors who went down the counsel route. So it'll be nice to hear maybe a little bit about that also while you're answering this piece.
Let me finish the solicitor because it's a small little nugget and I can then get along with what, chamber philosophy is all about. I did my solicitors because I'm a patient of arthritis. So my father was rather doubtful about my ability to be able to stand in court, blah, 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 blah. So he says, why don't you do your solicitors? And by then my brother had already done his solicitors. So I said, theek hai, kar lete hain. You want me to do it? I'll do it. So I did it. And it was 2 years I did my articles in a firm. And I knew that I'm doing it only to sort of pander to my father's wishes. I knew I was not going to be able to sit in a chair. I have hands in my pants when it comes to sitting down. I can't sit. Maybe 1 hour I have to sit without moving. I am happy because I've got a chair which moves, you know. That's the reason why it's possible. But then I didn't want to continue as a solicitor. But the firm where I had done my articles, they asked me to reconsider. And they said, you know, it's going to be difficult for you as a lady. You're not a Parsi, you're not a Gujarati, you're going straight into the High Court. Appeal will only lie to the Supreme Court and stuff like that. Who's your godfather in the profession who's going to give you work as counsel? Reconsider going across to join the High Court. Stay back with us. And I said, no, I want to go. So that was as far as my solicitor's, you know, stint as solicitor is concerned. Because the day I finished my last exam, I went across and I tried to meet Ashok Bhai to tell him that I want to join.
Want to join you. You speak of the solicitors so casually, ma'am. You know, there are people who struggle to take that exam and really try hard. And I can't believe you'd undertook an exam like that just to pander to your father's request. And you cleared it. You're a solicitor.
Yeah. And I cleared it rather well. So I asked him, I want to celebrate. He says, what is there to celebrate? You had to pass. You know, that is the sort of person he was. I said, I want to celebrate. So he says, all right, you can go to Hyderabad and have a trip to Hyderabad with your cousin. So then I went off to Hyderabad.
How nice.
Yeah, that's right.
So, ma'am, you also...
I'm sorry?
Sorry, no, I'll ask after you finish.
Yes, okay. So then I went and joined Ashok Bhai. And Ashok Bhai, you know, was not occupying a spacious room or a spacious chamber. He says, Rajani, therefore, you may not be able to come and attend physically the chambers. So I was not exposed to a chamber culture in that sense.
Okay.
But I belonged to the chambers of Mr. Ashok Desai. That chamber had a history. That chamber had a persona. Mr. Ashok Desai had a persona. He had a standing. He stood for various principles. He stood for what is, you know, required of a professional. All of us looked up to him because of that. For me, therefore, there was a mingling of chamber culture without me physically attending a chamber with what that chamber represented to all of us young lawyers. So when Tanisha, you ask me about chamber culture, it is the thinking of the chamber leader which makes the chamber culture, whether or not there is a physical space of a chamber. For example, I can associate the existence of a philosophy of a chamber without there being a chamber for so many advocates who sat in what we call the High Court library. If you're familiar with the High Court building, room number 38 and 39 are where the High Court original side library is situated. So people sat in room number 38, but they belong to the group of a senior advocate without going into their chambers. But even they had a philosophy, they had a chamber culture, all right? It may not be similar to that which, say, a Mr. Atul Setalvat's chamber or a Mr. Sirvai's chamber or a Ramanbhai Joshi's chamber, who actually had chambers big enough to accommodate juniors. Like Ashok Bhai, they too had a culture. So the culture is what your senior stands for. That is the culture.
Understood. Okay.
Super. So Rajani, ma'am, you also mentioned that when you joined that profession, that they said, moving into the High Court, that it's going to be difficult because you don't have a godfather, you're also a lady. How do you think the practice has evolved for women over the time? So from when you were practicing in the 80s to today, you know, what are the kind of major differences we're seeing for women in law?
Right. I find a lot number more women today in the profession than when I joined it. I find that the opportunity available for women has not increased as much as for men juniors. I find that the litigant today is not taken aback if the lawyer representing him in court is going to be a lady. They were taken aback in the 70s and the 80s. But over a period of time, the ability of law providing a income for women has increased, though as not as much as it has for men, because of the inability, for various reasons, for having a club culture amongst the women lawyers with their ex-colleagues, their ex-friends who are out in the industry. There is a large amount of that which leads to work coming the way of young professionals. There are therefore challenges which are unseen and unheard, which a lady advocate has to face today and which she tries to ignore at her peril. What do I mean by this? How many of us have got colleagues who are something in some industry or some economic venture or some undertaking or the other, who are known to us and therefore think of us as advocates when they have a legal problem? If there are 5 as far as men are concerned, there might be 1 or half as far as women colleagues are concerned. Because they are not out there in industry in such large numbers that they can think of their colleague back in college who has today joined the profession as being the person they want to go to. No, problem wahan se hi start hoti hai. That is what I mean when I talk about club culture or old colleagues culture and stuff like that. Second is the demands of our profession. Everybody knows this phrase that the law is a jealous mistress. But for a lady, it's a jealous master. So a lady who is a married lady, who is a mother, has got 3 masters to face. Whether we like it or not, the master at home, the children at home, and the law. So it becomes additionally difficult for her to juggle all these 3 things at the same time. And unlike other professions, one wrong word, you're facing a judge who can get very upset. So these are the sort of tensions which, are the unseen hurdles which a lady has to face. Apart from there being an unseen pressure on women, whether we like it or not, the manner in which there is chat in a group, the manner in which there is sometimes physical proximity which you are uncomfortable about. These are factors that still are not being spoken about despite the Me Too movement. So yes, there has been a change, but there has also been a change for the worse and the better. Dono taraf hai. That is the way I see it. I hope I am wrong as the worst part of it is concerned. If not today, in time, it will be tackled. And I only hope that for the better becomes betterer and betterer. It is going to be a challenge. It's going to be a challenge because not all of us are fortunate to have a senior like Mr. Desai. Not all of us are fortunate. there are seniors who would like physical intimacy. There are seniors who demand physical intimacy. There are seniors who don't encourage you to go out and show the world what you're capable of, which is what Mr. Desai did once. He was unable to go before the MRTPC in Delhi, and he says, Rajani, you go. And that was it. That was the start of my going out of Bombay for work. Never look back. How many of us have the courage to do that for our juniors today?
Do you think today's generation then of seniors is allowing juniors to prosper as much or not?
I am fortunate enough to be knowing or in the company of persons who think like me. I know that they are. They are not afraid of the next generation coming up. They are encouraging them to come up. This was pre-pandemic. The challenges post-pandemic is however much there might be people who want the next generation and their juniors to come up, there may not be enough work for them to do because the infrastructure available to do the work is limited. The work, therefore, itself is limited. And those of them qualified and trained to do work in that fashion is even less. So the challenges today are different here. Absolutely different. It's not, Arey Rajani, I can't attend this chamber summons. Will you go and attend it? That's how I went and faced some of our judges, you know. That is how we really sort of broke our blushes. Chamber summons tha. Jada mein jada kya hota? Adjourn hota, nahi hota. But now we don't have that sort of an opportunity. I once remember, it's an anecdote, but I'm going to discuss it without giving names.
Please.
I'm not giving names because one of the persons involved became a judge and then became a chief justice of one of the courts. So I'm not going to name names. So
what a pity
I heard I'm sorry?
What a pity that you can't name this person.
Yes. All of them lovable persons. So I heard this person say, I worked out 6 briefs today. And the senior said, none of my matters reached. What were the matters that you worked out? All 6 were directions and justice Lenton's chambers. You know, directions were in those days when you were told that the suit which has been filed is a commercial cause or a long cause or a contested short cause. So for each matter, you could mark 2 GMs. So 6 briefs were worked out is what this young person claimed, to which the senior said, I've not been able to work out any. So that was the sort of banter, you know, which went on. And that person who got 6 briefs went on to become a judge of our court, went on to become a chief justice somewhere else. Yeah. So opportunities are there, but these sort of opportunities are not going to be available post-pandemic. That is the worrying factor. That is the worrying factor.
Any other anecdotes like that from your time in the High Court?
I'm sure you have a...
I'm sorry.
Any other anecdotes like that from your time?
God, so many, but I don't know how to recollect them all.
You can take a moment. You can take a moment, browse all the memory files, and then pick out the best for us.
Yeah, I'll try. Yeah. Now, one is related to my senior. My senior, and I were briefed together, and he generally used to call us at about, say, 10 to his home for a conference. So as we went into his home, and I stood at the chamber door and said, Ashok bhai, may I come in? He looked up and said, matter much hai soon. What is there in this matter? I said, Ashok bhai, if there was something, they wouldn't have briefed you, they would have briefed me. They want you because they want you to pull out rabbits. You know? So he says, Sali. Now that word Sali was a term of endearment. in those days. But today it would be taken differently. But being Ashok by the manner in which he said it, etc., made it something which I will never forget. Because I always say that given my response, he then kept it in mind, because in that very same room, he then asked the attorney, whom he said, I'm busy in a parted, I can't come to Delhi tomorrow, take Rajani. In that very same chamber of his at home, gave me that opportunity. This gentleman was briefed with another colleague of mine, Aspi Chinoy, in a matter which was being argued in courtroom number 40. Before Justice, one of the really strict judges of those days. So Ashok Bhai was not able to come when it started. So the junior started. And there were 2 points involved. So as he was finishing the first point, and this was at about 5:15 or 4:30, we used to rise at 4:45 then, in the good old days. So the first point had been finished, and the second point was going to be started by the junior. Ashok Bhai slid in, sat next to the junior and said, Besi ja. So the junior turned and said, we have the second point. He said, Besi ja. So the junior just sat. The government had to then reply. The government was caught unawares, did not do a good job. And with a judgment, Ashok Bhai's client succeeded and was out with a judgment at 4:45. This is court.
Wow.
Because Ashok Bhai, when he came and sat in court, realized that the government did not have a counsel who was there with all the facts, who should have been there, knowing the judge was a strict judge, with the facts, with the papers and stuff. He realized all this was not there on the table, seized the moment and said, we'll stop at 1. And while the judgment was going on, said, there's the other point, but since you're with us on this, we need not argue that.
Wow.
These sort of things are wonderful anecdotes.
Ma'am, tell us an anecdote about you that involves you.
An anecdote. I don't know, because I'm so involved in what I'm doing. It's for others to tell anecdotes about oneself. No?
Shall we invite some of your friends? We should have invited some of your friends then. Okay, I have a suggestion. If not you, then of course, Janak Dwarkadas, right? So he was one of our guests previously. So if not you, then tell us an anecdote about him. Come on.
About Janak. About Janak.
If he's not watching, we'll send him this link for sure later.
No, I don't know. But I can tell you something about, the seniors such as Ashok Bhai and his Khatu Cooper and the others. They had such a fantastic bundle of information. And this is what they shared with us. So the ones which are popular, there are 2 which are popular. Both of them come back to mind, and I'm sharing it with you. They concern a person called Mr. Daftari, C.K. Daftari. He was on his legs arguing in the Central Court. Nani was a young advocate who was trying to make his mark and making his mark.
Okay.
He made a good point, which would have apparently knocked Mr. Daftari's case for a 6. So before he could be completed by Mr. Palkiwala, Daftari got up and started having a fit of cough. So the judges, being Mr. Daftari, said, can we get you some water? Can you get me some water? So Mr. Daftari, in order to put Mr. Palkiwala off, said, it is not, I'm not coughing because I'm not feeling well, but what is being argued by the young gentleman is I'm finding it difficult to swallow. But the judges were also going to be rather careful of accepting what Mr. Palkiwala was going to argue next.
Oh my God.
This is the wit that, existed in the Bombay High Court. The same gentleman, how unflappable he was. There was a young solicitor who did something, but was hauled up by a judge of then years, Justice Tendulkar. And he was asked to enter the witness box and certain questions were put to him. And Mr. Tendulkar felt that he had not done the right thing and therefore said, I'm going to issue notice to you of contempt. So this gentleman went out and he says, come back. When we reassemble at 2:45, you'll have to, otherwise you're going to face the wrath of the court. So apparently this gentleman went to Mr. Daftari. And Mr. Daftari was having his lunch. And Mr. Daftari said, what is it about? He says, sir, this is what has happened. He says, you got any papers in the matter? He says, no, this is all that has happened. He says, all right, I'll meet you outside the court. You come and join me there. So he says, you don't want to talk to me about the matter? So Mr. Daftari apparently said, no, just meet me outside the court. So come 2:45, Mr. Daftari was not there, but he came ambling along apparently with something tucked under his arm, some brief tucked under his arm, and he had a pipe or a cigarette or something. He finished smoking that. And then when Justice Tendulkar entered, he entered without having spoken to his client, the solicitor. And Mr. Tendulkar said, who was appearing for him? So it seems Daftari got up. And do you know what this gentleman has done and stuff like that? There might be certain things which I'm missing out or certain things which I'm adding because that's the way I heard of it. I heard about it. Mr. Daftari said, I don't think I need to go into the merits of the case at all before this court. All I need to tell this court is that some of us are old enough to do the wrong things correctly. He is too young even to do the right thing without making a mistake. Tendulkar withdrew the notice. You know, so these are the sort of things that history and history of wit and history of sagacity and history of wisdom is what Bombay High Court is all about. And this is